How's it going, everybody? It's the golden child of Georgia Independent Professional Wrestling, John Bivins here. We're here to bring you the inaugural episode of the Drop Down Leapfrog Dropkick Wrestling Podcast, a podcast in which we aim to take you all across the world to talk about different independent promotions, all kinds of stuff going on in Japan, New Japan, Noah, DDT, Tokyo Joshi Pro, and a lot more. I myself have actually been a professional wrestler for a little over 3 years now. So we hope to be able to bring on some different guests and just talk to them about their experiences in wrestling all across the Southeast, Georgia, Tennessee, but then also focus on independent promotions here in the U.S. as well. Just talk about a lot of different things. So today we're going to go ahead and get started talking about the big GCW shows that took place this weekend, as well as New Japan's big show, Dominion. A big weekend of shows for Game Changer Wrestling. They started off on Saturday with Tournament for Survival 8. The show opened up with Nick Gage calling out Zandig to the ring to present the trophy. And Zandig came out, and he was cutting a promo, and then Gage just sort of jumped him, started hitting him over the head with light tubes, which Zandig proceeded to not sell at all. And then they just sort of brawled for a little bit, and then Zandig gave Gage a headbutt and split him open. And then from there, the brawl just kind of abruptly ended with Gage just pretty much saying, everybody enjoy the weekend. And that was the main point of that. The first match was Cyclope versus Green Phantom versus Miedo Extremo. I would say it was a fairly average match. They didn't want to do too much, being the opening match of a deathmatch heavy weekend. So they didn't give away too much. Cyclope gets the win and advances on. The only real thing of note in the match was Miedo Extremo somewhere in the early half of the match. I didn't really get to see what happened. It didn't seem like anything too major, but apparently he hurt himself. And the announcers were speculating that he went to the back after that. And the announcers were speculating that he was going to the back to get some type of weapon, but afterwards he never came back. So that would actually play into the tag team match that he and Cyclope were a part of on night 2. Match number 2, you've got Tomoyo Harada versus Joey Janela versus Toru Sugiura. This match, they did a lot more stuff. In the first match there, Green Phantom looked a little bit hesitant being in a death match. I'm not sure how many he's been a part of. But for the 3 guys in match 2, this was something they were very experienced with. They went out there, did a lot of spots. There were many, many light tubes that were broken during the weekend, and this one had a lot of those. Toru Sugiura gets the win on Joey Janela, I believe. And, it was my first time seeing Joey Janela in quite a while. He's actually missing a tooth now. I'm not sure when that happened. But otherwise, he looked to be in excellent condition, the best shape that I've seen Janela in a long time. Janela really keeps improving to me, honestly. I've enjoyed his stuff for years, but as a wrestler, I can say a lot of his stuff looks a lot safer now. You can definitely tell that the wheels are turning and that he's got his opponent's safety as like his top priority now. He's a lot more careful, but he looks like he's having a great time out there, and this was a really good match. Match number 3 was John Wayne Murdoch versus Matt Tremont versus El Desperado of New Japan. And this one was absolutely awesome as well. If anyone listening to me is in charge of booking a promotion, if you can get me and Matt Tremont in the ring together at the same time, I would absolutely love that. Matt Tremont is a phenomenal worker. The first, I'd say, 2 minutes of the match was just them standing around and just getting chants and cheers. I mean, just doing absolutely nothing and getting the most out of it, which as a wrestler is what you aspire to be. Tremont was absolutely fantastic. Murdoch came across great. Murdoch kind of played the heel. Tremont was kind of in between, and El Desperado was the definite babyface, being the big star from New Japan, coming off that big run in the Best of Super Juniors that he had not too long ago. And so the match was absolutely awesome. El Desperado looked so happy to be involved in death matches. I don't think I've ever seen him just so expressive and just having the time of his life. So it was a lot of fun for everybody involved. So it was great to see. It's great to see Desperado getting to try new things and kind of venture out from New Japan. He's definitely on just a roll right now. Just great matches all the time. Just a lot of fun to watch. So, and it's fun to see him shake things up after being in Best of the Super Juniors and working different types of styles there, and then coming to the U.S. to work on in a different style. So match number 4 was Casey Kirk versus Sawyer Wreck versus Rina Yamashita. This one I'd say was the weakest match of the first round. It started off fairly strong, but then somewhere in the middle, it seemed like someone got their wires crossed, and it looked like things were just getting a little bit out of control. Rina Yamashita was absolutely over just from the time that she came out, and the crowd was with her the whole time. So they definitely wanted her to win, and they were happy when it happened. So it wasn't a bad match, but certainly you could tell it wasn't the strongest one. Moving on to match number 5, there was a scramble match with Alec Price, Gringo Loco, Jack Cartwheel, and Blake Christian. Just an absolute spot fest from start to finish, but for Game Changer Wrestling fans, that's not to be surprising at all. Alec Price looked really good. Gringo Loco always looks amazing. And I'd say Jack Cartwheel has a really, really high ceiling as far as where he can end up going. He just does a lot of amazing stuff in the ring, and he's got this sort of subtle type of charisma where everything he does, he puts everything into it, and he can come across really funny sometimes. He just seems like a really funny guy. So it was just a lot of spots. They did a lot of hard strikes, a lot of high flying, everything you'd expect from a GCW scramble match. Pretty paint by the numbers, but still, when you get the GCW scrambles, unless something goes horribly wrong, it's going to end up being a fairly good match, and that's pretty much what this one was. Nothing that you can't skip, but if you choose to watch it, you'll probably enjoy it. One thing was Dave Prazak was definitely talking a lot about Blake Christian cashing in his title shot coming up at some point. So they were kind of planting the seeds for what would come later on in the weekend. So Blake Christian gets the win here. They did one spot in the early part of the match where they were trying to do basically how many different moves can we do and land on our feet out of these different positions, like head scissors and ranas and things like that. So it was a lot of fun, creative enough. The first match of round 2 was John Wayne Murdoch versus Cyclope. It was a pretty short match, but they did some effective stuff. Cyclope started off chaining with his Beats headphones on, which I thought was pretty entertaining. They did a weed whacker spot, and Cyclope also hit a crossbody through the ropes to John Wayne Murdoch on the apron while he was covered in light tubes. They did a destroyer off the top rope through some barbed wire. So they did a lot of spots, but John Wayne gets the pin. Moving on, we've got Rina Yamashita versus Toru Sugiura. This one went pretty fast as well. They just did lots of stuff with light tubes, just typical deathmatch stuff, but a lot of fun. Yamashita gets the win over Sugiura. Sugiura was working as the subtle heel in the match, which would play into stuff that they ended up doing on night 2 and even later on in tonight. But not too much to it, but a decent enough match. Yamashita gets the win with the Splash Mountain Bomb onto a light tube door. And the finals of Tournament for Survival 8 was Rina Yamashita versus John Wayne Murdoch. This match I thought was really, really effective in getting Yamashita over, but also Murdoch looked really, really good. They did a lot of different stuff. There was one point where Murdoch just was grabbing light tubes as fast as he could and breaking them in succession over her head. And I think he probably went through at least like 15 tubes. I didn't have time to count them all because he was just busting them one right after the other. And by the end of it, the crowd was standing up on their feet, like cheering for him. And I don't think it was supposed to come across as a babyface spot, but he just looked like the toughest, coolest looking guy in the world, just slinging glass everywhere. Yamashita just got back up, and she kept good fire the whole time. She wins with the Splash Mountain Bomb onto a pile of light tubes and chairs. So you could kind of tell where this one was going, because once it got down to the finals, I think Yamashita would be considered the favorite by most people to win. But they did a lot of good stuff to make you think that Murdoch had a chance. They did a spot there at the end where Murdoch and Yamashita went off of the scaffold that they had over on the side of the ring, which Murdoch kicked out of at 1. It was sort of self-parody. At that point, it's a little bit out there to be doing stuff like that, but it was a big show, and it did get a great reaction. But at the same time, I don't know. I think that's one of the problems that GCW runs into, is desensitizing their audience by doing so many kickouts and so many near falls. So when you see something like that, even at this point, it's kind of like, okay, that's not going to be the finish, because they want to subvert you, and they've subverted you so many times that even the big stuff is not really a believable finish. But overall, I'd say it was a really good show. It was extremely effective in getting Yamashita over. After the match, Tomoya Harada and Toru Sugiura came down to the ring. They appeared to be congratulating Yamashita on the win, and then they proceeded to jump her and be ran out of the ring afterwards. So GCW actually has a tour of Japan coming up in July, so it's clear that they're trying to establish some type of angle, create some heels for the GCW guys to go against when they head over to Japan in a little bit. So, but all in all, a thumbs up show for night 1 for GCW. Show number 2 for GCW of the weekend was Cage of Survival 2. Show opened up with Maki Ito taking on Janai Kai. It was a pretty solid match, nothing too incredible. Just simple, basic opening match. You know Maki Ito, you know the spots, so it was pretty much paint by the numbers. Afterwards, Matt Cardona and Steph DeLander came out. It seems very much that they're building to Maki Ito and Nick Gage versus Cardona and Steph DeLander at some point. So I think the sooner that they go ahead and get the ball rolling on that and get it over with, the better. After that, Cardona and DeLander took on the Kirks, Brandon and Casey. The match was pretty solid, but, I mean, your opinion of Matt Cardona is purely going to be based on if you like 1980s cowardice heels or not, and your tolerance for seeing a jacked-up ex-WWE guy playing one on the indies in 2023. Personally, the act has grown very thin for me at this point, and I think it has for a lot of other people as well, but it seems like Cardona's having a good time, so I can't hate on him too much for that. But as far as his in-ring stuff, it hasn't been lighting the world on fire here lately either. So after that, we had El Hijo de Vikingo taking on Ninja Mac. This one also very much what you would expect, just amazing spots from start to finish. You had a little bit of a few mix-ups here and there, which is oft to happen with Ninja Mac matches. I mean, you can't really fault the guy, though, because when you try so many different amazing and incredible things, you're bound to slip on at least one of them, and he tries a lot in every single match. But all in all, it was a lot of fun to watch. Some great lucha spots. Definitely a match to go out of your way to see. One of the best matches for the GCW weekend. And following that up was the Nick Wayne, Jordan Oliver, and Mike Bailey versus Alec Price, Jimmy Lloyd, and Jack Cartwheel. And this match was absolutely fantastic. Jordan Oliver he impresses me every time that I see him. He has such great babyface mannerisms, such great presence. What can you say about Nick Wayne that hasn't already been said? 17 years old, and he is already a better wrestler and a better athlete than I will ever be in my life. He's fantastic. The two of them work super well together as a team. And then you had Mike Bailey out there, sort of the elder statesman. Mike Bailey is having... I will die on the hill that 2023 is the year of Mike Bailey, just the number of incredible matches that I've seen this guy personally have. Everything from Impact to GCW to Best of the Super Juniors. He is a highlight on every show that he's on. And Alec Price and Jimmy Lloyd and Jack Cartwheel just played really great off of them. It was just fun overall to watch. I mean, just awesome stuff. After that, we had Los Mazecios, which is Miedo Extremo and Ciclope, taking on Soul Meat of Toru Sugiura and Tomoyo Harada, the guys from Freedoms from the night before. And it was a pretty short match, not much to it. As I mentioned earlier, Miedo Extremo seemed to really mess up his shoulder on the first night. So he didn't do much in this match, and he seemed to be hurting pretty bad. So I'm not sure the extent of that, but he was keeping his shoulder close to him at all times. But Los Mazecios get the win, and afterwards Sugiura and Harada jumped them again, and the rest of the GCW locker room came out to run them off, pretty much setting up some stuff for the July tour of Japan that GCW is going on. Then after that, we had El Desperado taking on Joey Janela in a death match. This match absolutely ruled. El Desperado is a fantastic wrestler and almost an even better deathmatch wrestler. Just the visuals that he's able to create with the makeup on under the mask. And he was bleeding in this match like crazy. The Janela, of course, whenever he's in a death match, someone always has to tear the mask for him to be able to get blood. But you had the visual of just him pouring blood and it just seeping out from under the holes on his mask, and his eyes are rolling around in the back of his head, and he just looks like he is the most miserable human being you've ever seen. And they just proceeded to just kill each other with light tubes, doors. There was at one point that Janela climbed this absolutely massive ladder and did a double stomp through a barbed wire door onto Desperado. That got a 2 count, but it was amazing. They did all kinds of spots. If you love death matches, this is probably the best one of the weekend. I would say really outside of the three-way with Tremont and Murdoch and Desperado on night one, this might be the best death match of the weekend. So it was fantastic and definitely worth going out of your way to see. Then after a long intermission, we had the Cage of Survival match for the GCW World Championship. You had Masha Slamovich taking on Rina Yamashita. It's interesting to me that they call this the Cage of Survival because it's not really a cage at all. They had the 4 sides, well actually it was 3 sides of a conventional steel cage, but they were not connected. They were tied to pillars in the building and sort of just propped up, leaning against the ring at like a not even 90 degree angle, just sort of like propped up against the side of the ring. And then on the other side, they had a scaffold. So if you want to look for one complaint, that's one thing that always kind of bugs me is whenever there's a scaffold right next to the ring during a death match, you pretty much know that it's not going to be over until someone takes a bump off the scaffold. So, and that was the case here too. They traded a lot of big spots. They had some trouble actually breaking the glass, of all things. There was a spot early where Slamovich was supposed to throw, Rina was supposed to throw Slamovich through a pane of glass. This was in like the opening 2 minutes or so, and she just bounces off of the pane of glass, which is really funny to see. It's just a strange visual. And the crowd started booing at that, but they immediately went through it afterwards. And then there was a spot where Slamovich was supposed to go through a pane of glass that was propped onto the side of the steel cage. And when she didn't, Yamashita had to climb to the top rope and do a cross body onto Slamovich, who was laying on the cage with the glass, which looked like it sucked. But they did lots of stuff, lots of barbed wire. So they go for several minutes, and they do the big spot off of the scaffold, and you can tell it's getting near the end. And then all of a sudden, Blake Christian, who is dressed up at ringside as a cameraman from head to toe, as most cameramen are at all times, and gets in the ring and basically cashes in his grab the brass ring championship match and turns it into a three-way and curb stomps Slamovich to win the title. So I think it was a smart use of the cash-in gimmick, because from here you can do title matches with Christian and Yamashita, Christian and Slamovich. They basically were able to get the title off of Slamovich without really having to damage anyone's credibility. But it was, the fans stood up and they were throwing things into the ring. It sort of is what it is, as far as the visual of that. I'm not the biggest fan of seeing fans throw garbage into the ring, especially just from the sense that it feels very manufactured. It feels like they want the old school heat reaction of the 70s when fans would get outraged and disgusted and throw their garbage in the ring. And it just feels very, very processed. But I think from there, Blake Christian can do a lot of great things with the GCW World Title. He's an excellent wrestler, and GCW has an amazing amount of baby faces. That's one thing I can't commend GCW on enough, is the fact that they have a stacked roster with a lot of good baby faces that they can substitute in as challengers at any given time. Right now you've got Effie, you've got Jimmy Lloyd, you've got Mike Bailey. You've got a lot of guys that you can just throw in there that are going to be great matches. And they have a lot of shows to build up other challengers as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Blake Christian as champion, but it was a good start to the title run, I'd say, overall. So the other big show that I had the chance to watch this weekend was the New Japan Dominion show from Sunday morning. The show opened up with Will Ospreay versus Lance Archer in the U.S. Championship #1 Contenders Tournament. And this match ruled. It was a PWG-style match in some ways. Reminded me of PWG from a couple years ago. They started off just trading big moves. The very first spot of the match, actually, was Lance Archer charging at Will Ospreay from the bell and giving him a shoulder tackle. And Ospreay proceeded to take a flip bump from the shoulder tackle, which is a spot that always pops me. From there, they went into just trading lots of big moves. Archer did the Jushin Thunder Liger flip dive off the apron, and Ospreay caught him beautifully. Archer hit the blackout in the ring, and Ospreay kicked out. He hit him with a hidden blade, and Archer kicked out at one, and so Ospreay said, "Okay, bet," and then hit him with 3 more in a row. I'm always a big fan of that finish, when a guy just has to keep hitting his big move over and over and over again, like a video game where you're just getting in that one good shot and your opponent just can't do anything, and so you just finish him off with that. So it turned out great. Absolutely phenomenal match. It was an amazing show from start to finish, to be honest. So we move on now to the second match, which was Naito, Shingo, Bushi, and Titan versus Taichi, Doki, Yoshinobu Kanemaru, and Taka Michinoku. This was another really good match, fairly short, nothing too much to write home about. If anything, it sort of felt like a love letter to Titan, as he was able to get the win on Taka, and LIJ all raised his hand, gave him some time in the ring to just bow to the fans. So you very much get the impression that he's going to be gone from New Japan for just a little bit. Probably won't see him at all during the G1 tournament, or maybe not even for a little bit after that. So they kind of wanted to send him out on a good note. So it was just a basic match, but really enjoyable to watch as well. So match number 3 was Catch 2-2 versus Kushida and Kevin Knight for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Tag Team Championship. This match was really, really good as well. Catch 2-2, I have the feeling with them that if they were on, say, AEW television or on NXT or on some platform where you were seeing matches from them every single week and they were allowed to just have a run like they're capable of having, we would be in the conversation of them being one of the best tag teams in the world. Because every time I see them, they just complement each other so well. Akira's got such great explosiveness, and TJP can as well. But he also he's able to slow things down and just pace matches super, super well. So they worked really well with Kushida and Knight. There was a short heat on Knight, probably 2 to 3 minutes out of the 8 to 10 that they got. And then the rest of it was just trading big near falls and big moves and counters. And then Catch 2-2 was able to get the win to get their second IWGP Junior Heavyweight Tag Team titles. Then afterwards, Catch 2-2 was actually cornered by Dan Maloney from the Best of the Super Juniors, the fellow member of the United Empire. And afterwards, Clark Connors came out and was saying that he wanted a shot at Catch 2-2. And he turned to the entranceway to reveal who his partner was going to be. And at that time, Dan Maloney from the United Empire just ran up and started attacking TJP and Akira and joined Bullet Club. So it seemed it seems like a good pairing. I like the pairing of Connors and Maloney. Both are sort of smaller guys, but work more of a heavyweight style. They use a lot of power-based offense. So it makes sense, and I think it would be good for Clark Connors to just get a run like that, just to get a little more experience. Clark Connors, I think the packaging around him is absolutely fantastic right now. He's got a great look. He looks like $1 million. He's got the best theme music in wrestling, bar none to me right now. But he's still finding himself right now in the ring, I would say. They call him the Wild Rhino at some points. But then his finisher is the No Chaser. And it seems that most of his heat is seeming to come from the fact that he drinks and swears a lot. So I think they're trying to really find the direction that they want him to go. And he's trying to kind of find himself within New Japan. But I think after some time, he's gonna really start clicking. And hopefully this Dan Maloney partnership will help him get there. So coming up after that, we had Zack Sabre Jr. and Jeff Cobb for the New Japan TV title. This match was absolutely fantastic as well, as most Zack Sabre Jr. matches are. The whole center of the match was Jeff Cobb trying to do power spots and Zack trying to find counters, which he was able to do. He scored a crucifix pin for the win. It was just fantastic. Short match. They didn't really bump up close against the TV time limit like they've done in several of Zack's matches lately, which is actually how they got to this match in the first place, the time limit draw that he had with Cobb. So it turned out great. Zack Sabre Jr. has been on a really, really great run of just good, short, fast-paced, dramatic 15-minute matches lately. And this lived up to every bit of everything he's been involved in lately. So then from there, we moved to Bishamon versus the House of Torture, Evil and Yujiro Takahashi versus Aaron Hanare and the Great Okan for the IWGP Heavyweight and Strong Tag Team Championships. This one, I have to say, I was not looking forward to a ton coming in. I knew it had the potential to be great, but the House of Torture stuff lately with Yujiro and Evil has not been a lot of fun to watch, to the point that Kevin Kelly is openly burying it every time that they get in the ring. And this time I thought it actually worked fairly well in the triple threat tag team environment. I think it was because you were able to have Goto and Yoshihashi and Hanare and Okan go sort of as just straightforward, tag team wrestling, and then the House of Torture stuff was kind of mixed in between. And so instead of it being a whole match of just ref bumps and outside interference and all of the tiresome tropes that they've gone through, it was a little bit faster paced, and you actually could see Evil and Yujiro winning and stealing the match from the other two teams going at each other. So it made the dynamic a little bit more playful instead of just a slog to get through. So I think it turned out great. And then afterwards, the commentators were talking about how FTR might be wanting another shot at the IWGP tag team titles. But then Gabriel Kidd and Alex Coughlin actually came out and jumped Bishamon and have aligned themselves with Bullet Club, which I think is interesting, but I'm not all completely behind it yet. Alex Coughlin is a really good natural babyface. The stuff that I've seen him do on the Independents and on the New Japan USA shows, he's got some great power spots, and the people really buy him as a babyface. I think he was really starting to find himself as well. And so turning him heel this short into his career, I don't know if that's the best thing for him right now. Gabriel Kidd, sort of the same thing. I think Kidd needs some type of direction. And I think the team with Coughlin is a great thing for him, but I'm not entirely sold on this Bullet Club thing. But it's definite that they're going for a younger look with Bullet Club, a more intense, less crowd-pleasing, less comedy-based Bullet Club, and a lot more of a serious presentation. So I think it'll be interesting to see how they both end up being booked throughout the G1 tournament to kind of tell us where they're going to be going forward after that. So after that, we move to David Finlay versus El Phantasmo for the Never Openweight Championship. This match started out extremely hot with El Phantasmo doing all kinds of crazy dives, lots of good offense. Phantasmo is a fantastic babyface. He's got a lot of great fire, and the fans are really, really behind him. So that's why it was kind of disappointing when Finlay kind of took over on Heat, and that was basically the whole match from there on. Phantasmo was able to get in a few hope spots here and there, but it was pretty much predominantly David Finlay for the last 7 minutes of a nearly 20-minute match. So it definitely felt like by the time that Finlay got the pin, it was like, okay, we knew where this was going for the longest time. So it was a lot like the match that Finlay had with Tama Tonga where he won the championship. I wouldn't say quite as intense. They didn't tease the ref stoppages quite as much in this match as they did in that match. But it just felt like overkill in some ways. Like they're really pushing David Finlay hard as just this killer, this merciless, dictator of Bullet Club. And I don't know, Finlay just worked for me so much better as a babyface. There were parts that I didn't like of his babyface promos and such, but I think that could have been ironed out. And I don't know if the answer to ironing it out was to turn him heel and cut promos talking about savages. It's just it's a mixed bag for me with David Finlay and the Bullet Club right now. But Finlay gets the win over Phantasmo. But this is definitely not the end of their story, so we'll see how things play out from there. From there, we had Hiromu Takahashi versus Master Wato for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. Is it cool to say that we're fans of Master Wato now? There's a lot to be desired when it comes to his gimmick and his appearance overall, but as a worker, he has improved a lot lately. He's getting better in most matches, and the fans have really come to accept him. The win in the Best of the Super Juniors, I think, was a big stepping point for him, because in that match with Teton, people wanted to see him win, and they went crazy when he did. And so there were a lot of times in this match where he got some really close near falls, and they really, really teased it, and the place was coming absolutely unglued. They went around 20 minutes or so, and Takahashi gets the win. It's sort of a continuation of the story that was playing out starting at Wrestle Kingdom this year, where they had the four-way match where Master Wato was sort of the odd man out, and nobody thought that he was going to have a chance to win. And then in the match, he got a ton of near falls, and he looked fantastic. And so people started to get behind him, and then he ended up losing. And then he goes all the way through Best of the Super Juniors, wins that, and comes really, really close again. So this is par for the course New Japan booking, where they will let a babyface get really, really close to an accomplishment, and just keep it barely out of reach until he finally gets it. So sort of the same thing they're doing right now with Okada and Umino. So hopefully it works out for Wato going forward, but he showed a lot in this match, and I think his best years are definitely yet to come. But speaking of Okada and Umino, the next match was the Never Openweight 6-man Tag Team Championship with Okada, Tanahashi, and Ishii defending against Claudio Castagnoli, Jon Moxley, and Shota Umino. This match was awesome. It ruled. It was an absolute AEW match. It didn't feel like a New Japan match almost at all. It didn't really go by a standard New Japan pattern. It was just pretty much guys getting in there and just doing stuff, just start to finish. Jon Moxley has such an amazing presence and aura in Japan that I think some of the stuff that he does in the United States, I don't feel like we fully appreciate him enough, because there are times where he tagged in this match and just the way that he walked to go pick someone up, you could hear the fans start to rumble a little bit, just thinking, oh my God, what is this guy about to do? And so Moxley was an absolute highlight. Castagnoli, it's so bizarre seeing him after being in so many different places, on so many different stages, to finally be in New Japan, and him getting the giant swing on Okada was just a fantastic visual, and the fans were going nuts. They were going nuts throughout the entire thing, but they were coming unglued when he had Okada and was just spinning him around. So there was a lot of interesting stuff. People paired off together. Moxley and Ishii did some amazing stuff together, including a moment where Ishii headbutted Moxley and split him open immediately. And Moxley just kept going. He didn't even, it was a spot in the match, but he kept rolling afterwards. But it looks like it sucked. Tanahashi was great. Looks like he was having trouble moving around there, but that's par for the course for Tanahashi at this point in his career. But it was an amazing match overall. Lots of fun. Close to 20 minutes of action. It flew by. It felt like it was no time at all. And Okada ended up getting the pin on Umino with the Rainmaker, which I think is another credit to the way that they've been telling the story between Okada and Umino, in the sense that to this point, the announcers have always been stressing that Okada doesn't see Umino as worthy of him having to use the Rainmaker on him. And so Okada finally hitting him with the Rainmaker, in a sense, was a small victory for Umino. So they gave him a lot of stuff before they beat him, and it took Okada actually having to bust out the primary finisher that he uses instead of using the money clip to get the pin there on Umino. And then afterwards, Jon Moxley grabbed the microphone and basically just said, you may have beat us tonight, but Okada, you're not the best wrestler in the world. We've trained with the best wrestler in the world, and he's got something to say to you, which was Bryan Danielson laying out the challenge to Okada, seemingly to be answered at Forbidden Door, which is going to be amazing. So we'll see how everything goes from there. But there's a lot of stuff to be excited right now about in New Japan, just from an Okada standpoint, from the young guys' standpoint. There's a lot of guys on the rise, and you're seeing it now. New Japan had a very standard pattern of booking there for a little bit, and it feels like in 2023, it's a major watershed moment for them where they're elevating a ton of new guys. So very exciting stuff. Which takes us now to our main event, which was Sanada versus Yota Tsuji for the IWGP World Championship. Wow. Tsuji is really good. He came back from his excursion to Mexico, and in his first match, he was hitting flipping overdrive power bombs, Fosbury flops, curb stomps, of all things. So he was just going in there and hitting big moves from the beginning. Sanada countered early into Skull End to make you think that he was going to get cut off and beaten fairly quickly. But it felt like it could end really early, and then sort of things settled into a pattern for a little bit, which built to Sanada making a comeback. And from there, they traded near falls for a little bit. Tsuji got several near falls on Sonata that were very, very believable. That was one of the interesting things about this being Tsuji's first match back from excursion, was his moveset is not established yet to the New Japan audience. And so anything that Sonata was kicking out of was the first time that had ever been kicked out of. So every move that he was hitting was a believable near fall. So I think that was really smart of them to go ahead and capitalize on what he had coming back. To be fair, though, I don't think they knew just how big of a star he was going to be perceived as coming into this match, because it was an all Tsuji crowd. There was not really much for Sonata at all. I think there was a little bit of chance early on, but they were electric, and they were for Tsuji the entire time. They did pop when Sonata was able to get the pin after deadfall. And so it doesn't feel like Sonata's dead as a babyface champion or anything like that. But the fans were definitely behind Tsuji for a lot of this match. But overall, it was an extremely interesting show, and it'll be great to see where things go from here. I didn't mention it earlier, but they announced the 32 participants for this year's G1 tournament. Lots of stuff to be excited about that if you're a New Japan fan. AEW's Eddie Kingston is going to be part of the brackets this year. Kaito Kiyomiya from Pro Wrestling Noah. Tonga Loa is going to be making his return from injury. You got newcomers like Alex Coughlin, Gabriel Kidd. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be really interesting to see where they go from here, especially building into Wrestle Kingdom. Because usually coming out of G1, you kind of know the general direction of where they're going to go. So it'll be interesting to see how they position Sonata, who, if anyone, is able to pin him during the tournament, and the feuds that they'll kind of build from there. Also, they did a spot very early on, to backtrack a little bit. They did a spot really early on before the bell rang where Tsuji called for the LIJ fist bump, and all the LIJ guys were kind of looking at each other like, what is this guy doing? So it seems like they're already kind of planting the seeds for Tsuji taking over LIJ and turning on Naito, or Naito turning on Tsuji, or something like that. There's already smoke coming from that, and it looks like that's going to be a full-blown fire, if not by Wrestle Kingdom, then maybe coming out of Wrestle Kingdom sometime next year. So, but overall, a fantastic show from start to finish, a little over 3.5 hours long. So, but an easy watch and an easy recommend for anyone that's a fan of New Japan. So coming out of this, the next big show for New Japan, and really in all of Japan, is the All Together Again show, taking place on June the 9th, with representatives from Noah, All Japan, and New Japan all on the same card together. So it looks to be a really good show. So we hope to be able to bring you a conversation about that coming up soon. So that'll do it here for the inaugural episode of the Drop Down Leapfrog Dropkick Wrestling Podcast. We appreciate you guys checking us out, and we will talk to you again very soon.